Opening day is a week away, so let's get another update on how the White Sox have looked live and in person with my guest on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Elijah Evans of Just Baseball and Future Sox was recently in Arizona to check out the White Sox camp, and he's joining me today to go over what he saw in camp. When is the right time to trade Luis Robert Jr. in Just Baseball's updated top 100 prospect list that has 7 Pal Hose players in it? But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And let's bring in Elijah Evans, friend of the show, future superstar, and whatever he's going to be doing in his future here. Elijah, thank you for joining me. And right off the bat, how surprised were you that Shawn Burke is the opening day starter?
Thanks for having me, Todd. It's always a pleasure. It's always good to join you. Yeah, pretty surprised, man. Definitely not expected. I'm fired up for the guy. This is someone who I've been, covering and keeping an eye on and knowing for a while at this point. I kind of talked through some of his rehab with him in 2023 when he's going through the shoulder injury, and he's had a long path to this. But at the same time, I think more than anything, it's a symbol from the White Sox of, hey, this is about the youth right now. This is the focus. This is the goal. Like, they could have gone with Martin Perez as the veteran. Yeah, they could have gone with Davis Martin as the pseudo veterans, young guy bridge kind of, right? But instead they said, you know what, we're going to go with the young guy who has 4 major league games under his belt, but the stuff is great. He has probably the highest upside of those 4 guys in the rotation so far. And, it's just a sign to the organization of like, this is the next generation. We're focused on that. We're not living in this past rebuild. We are 100% sight set on the future and long-term health of this organization. And I'm here for it. I really am. I'm totally here for this decision. I was surprised for sure, but I'm happy about it, honestly.
Although we'll talk about in the third segment, it's interesting that, he's got the most potential of this current staff. But once Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith join the rotation, he probably drops down to and even Grant Taylor, he drops down to maybe the 4th starter. That's just the interesting thing. But we'll talk about that in the third segment. What the heck should the White Sox now do at shortstop, and how far away is Colson Montgomery from getting to the majors?
Yeah, so this was an interesting thing at camp for sure, being there and kind of seeing how this played out, looking at where the lineups were going, listening to Will Venable kind of talk about this position multiple times, right? I was there during the week where Colson Montgomery was hurt. He was out of games. He wasn't playing much. I talked to him a handful of times. He was in good spirits. He was getting himself back into, the batting cages. He was getting himself rolling. He was getting back to playing shape. The day I left was the day he ended up getting back into a game. And that's good to see him back, but at that point it was kind of too late, right? Like, I think the goal was giving him a chance to win the spot at a camp, but missing a week and a half with an injury, not being at his full self, like there was no chance at that point, in my opinion, that he was going to make the team, right? So I think at that point they were just like, all right, we'll get him to minor league camp. We'll make sure he's getting the reps he needs to get. We'll get him feeling good heading into the season, and then he'll be good from there. Now it comes down to like, what does that look like for now? Because I still think the goal is for Colson to be the shortstop of this team fairly soon. I think it's probably a late May, early June type of call up, depending on the way things go in Charlotte. I think the goal would be for him to have a really good month or 2 there to start the season, and by June to be the full-time starting shortstop of the White Sox for the rest of the season. So then it's like, what does the next month and a half or so look like? The simple option is Jacob Amaya. I know it's not glorious. Nobody really wants to see it, but it is the option of like a good defender. He was there last year. He's on the 40-man. There's kind of just like an ease there to that. The more interesting situation is Chase Mydroth and Brooks Baldwin. Both these guys are, probably utility type players when you look at who they are as a player. I think, Baldwin's a guy who plays all over the field. He's been playing mostly infield. When I was there, I asked him if he was playing mostly infield, and he was like, yeah, I've been playing mostly infield, but I still got my reps in the outfield. And that's going to be valuable because with the outfield injuries, Baldwin's a guy that played outfield throughout the minor leagues, a good amount of innings here and there. And, I think his value will come from his ability to play anywhere. I think that's kind of, Lurie Garcia, but hopefully a little bit more productive offensively, right? That type of appeal where it's like Brooks Baldwin can go out and play center field one day if Luis Robert needs a day off, right? Or you want to DH Luis Robert for a day. Brooks Baldwin can also step in at shortstop if you need him to. Where it becomes interesting is Chase Mydroth, because Chase Mydroth isn't on the 40-man. So that's where it gets a little complicated. Coming over from the Red Sox, he's not on the 40-man roster yet, but he's getting a lot of reps at shortstop. He's been getting more reps at shortstop in the lineup in spring training than either Mydroth or Baldwin have been getting. So I think the organization, they want to like see what they have in him because he's a new guy to the organization, right? So I think part of that is just trying to see him in game. But I also think that part of that is like Chase Mydroth might be the best option to actually play shortstop for the White Sox in terms of giving you quality at bats day in and day out. Incredibly high walk rate last year. He got on base at a 437 clip. One of my favorite quotes from Arizona that I got was Mydroth saying, my job is to get on base, to get on first base. Like I have picked my times to try and do damage, but my job every time I get up there is to get on first base for the guys behind me. And that's the type of hitter that the White Sox need some of, right? I think that's something that the organization has lacked and the lineup has lacked. So while Mydroth isn't really a true shortstop, that's where it gets interesting, is both Mydroth and Baldwin aren't probably the guys you ideally want playing shortstop. I think those guys you'd rather have at second base or as a utility rotating guy. Like, I think they're capable of playing shortstop. And with Mydroth, like I would just rather see him get reps than Jacob Amaya personally. I think there's a lot more intrigue there. There's a lot more to like there. And if it's only a month or two at shortstop, I think you can live with the defense. I don't think it's great, but I think you can live with it. So it's like, what does that look like? But then you got to clear a 40-man spot, right? There's 2 40-man spots that are going to open up because Prelander Baroa and Juan Corella both going down with Tommy John. 2 spots are opening. But there's a lot of other guys that got to fill those spots. Brandon Drury needs a 40-man spot. He's clearly making the roster at this point, right? There's one or two other pitchers that might need a 40-man spot from that core of guys trying to make the roster on the pitching side, right? So we'll see how that shakes out. I think Mydroth is the most interesting option, but I would not be surprised at this point to see it be Jacob Amaya on opening day.
And that's why, too, I mean, again, I love Chase Mydroth, the modern-day Greek god of walks. I've got the bet with Bez of On Tap Sportsnet about, I think, how many walks he gets. But the thing that, like, when I did the roster projection, my most recent one on Southside Showdown was it is creating that 40-man spot. And I'm just kind of convinced that they kind of want to see more of these veterans. So what it makes sense to me even is it's not ideal, but you have Josh Rojas at shortstop, and then Lenyn Sosa rotating with Jacob Amaya coming off the bench in late innings because of how bad their gloves are. And then you have Brandon Drury mine second. And then the other thing is you can probably bring up Mydroth and Montgomery at the same time because somebody's going to fail. I mean, somebody is going to get DFA'd at some point to create a spot on the 40-man roster. I mean, I agree with you. I would love to see Chase Mydroth. I mean, on there, but you see the type of hitting that Lenyn Sosa's had. I think he might make the roster too. So it's just going to be an interesting crunch.
Yeah. It's the infield stuff is interesting. And this is something I've been trying to follow all spring when I was there, now being back from I've been trying to keep up with it all spring because it's hard. There's not a clear situation really. You could go a lot of different ways. You've got Vaughn, you've got Rojas, and you've got Vargas, right? Like those are the 3 that you're penciling in the infield. From there, you've got 3 spots at least. It could be 4 depending on the way they shake it out. If they want to have Baldwin be the 7th infielder / 5th outfielder, he could be both, honestly, if Slater's hurt or if Benny's hurt. But it sounds like Slater and Benny are working towards being back. So assuming those guys are back, you've got 3 more infield spots to fill. I think Lenyn Sosa's got one, and I think Brandon Drury's got one at this point, right? So then it's like, if that's your option, you need a shortstop there, and you need someone who can play legit shortstop because none of those Rojas can play shortstop, but really of those 5 that are listed there, none of them are legit shortstops. Yeah. So that's what makes me think it ends up being Amaya. I mean, Amaya, Drury, and Sosa as the 3 additional infielders is like the worst possible outcome in my mind in terms of like fun intrigue. But at the same time, it might make the most sense for a month. Like I want to see Brian Ramos play. I want to see Brooks Baldwin play. I want to see Chase Mydroth play. We'll see how it works out. We'll see what happens. I still am not necessarily buying into the Lenyn Sosa thing. I get he's looked good in spring. He's going to get some at bats. He's probably going to make this roster. I think sooner than later, within a month of the season, I'm going to be already ready to see Baldwin or Ramos instead of Sosa, but we'll see what happens, right? You never know come the season. So the infield's a weird spot. It's tricky. I mean, they made the decision with the catchers finally, which was bound at this point. When I was in Arizona, it was pretty clear that the catchers were going to remain Theis and Lee and that, Caro and Teal would be kind of the next wave. But ultimately, like this offense, man, it's going to be hard to watch for a while. But sooner than later, whether or not it's opening day, by June, I think you're looking at an offense that has Teal, Caro, Colson Montgomery, Brooks Baldwin, Brian Ramos, Chase Mydroth. Any of those 6, if not all of them, will be up fairly early this season. So while the offense is a little hard to watch probably early in the season, you've got 6 guys that are going to be in Charlotte. If none of them make the roster, right? I think one might, but like at most, probably one is making the roster at this point. All those other guys will be up fairly early in the season.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement on that. And like to me, I've just come to this conclusion with Lenny Sosa. Ride his hot bat, and once it cools off, get rid of him. You don't need him anymore because at
Yeah.
that point, then move on. Who else impressed you in camp?
Yeah, a lot of impressive guys. Honestly, up and down. I mean, the pitching side is just really impressive overall, man. I think that from an organizational perspective, I don't think the White Sox have been in a better spot pitching wise in my time watching the White Sox. I think in probably since the '05 team, honestly, I really don't think there's been a better time for pitching organizational depth and development than this organization's in right now. I mean, I talked to Matt Zaleski, who's the pitching coordinator for the minor leagues, and one of the guys, Brian Bannister made some guidance. I didn't talk to Bannister directly, but talking to Zaleski, like it's just clear that these guys are adding pitches. They're working on stuff. There's a clear mindset of this pitching from top down in the entire organization. And that's something that the White Sox have not had. Even a couple years ago, they did not have that. There is a vision. There's an idea. There's a reason that each pitcher is using the pitches they're using, right? Like the kick change is becoming rampant. Davis Martin's kick change has become 7-8 guys in the organization now are throwing the kick change. They're all guys that have a hard time throwing their changeup. They're guys that have a lot of natural arm side run. They're building that kick change in, right? The sinker is becoming a thing. A lot of guys, the sinker and the cutter both, right? Both of those different fastball variations for different reasons are being employed throughout the minors, throughout the majors, all the guys, right? So I think just pitching overall was impressive. Obviously, it's hard not to be impressed by the big. I'm calling them the big three. That's my name now for these pitching prospects because it's really easy. Everybody loves talking about Schultz and Hagen, and they're incredible, right? But it's become pretty clear that Grant Taylor is further behind in his arm buildup process, but is right there with those guys in terms of the upside he has. Honestly, I mean, this is a guy who the ceiling is the limit for all three of these guys, and having three pitching prospects in the organization with that type of upside is a luxury that basically no team has other than the White Sox right now, and that's something that is going to be extremely fun to watch. Watching all three of them live, talking to all three of them, like. There's just a lot to like. They're all adding pitches. They're all doing things to continue to build themselves beyond just what they already are. All three of those guys could go in and absolutely dominate high A, double A baseball this season, but they're not satisfied there, right? Like the goal is still adding more things, still continuing to build up that stuff and being ready to, be the leaders of this pitching staff in 2026 and beyond, right? Like I think the goal with those three is to be the guys who are the studs of this team on the pitching side, beyond the guys who are already, in major leagues. And there's other guys that are up at the higher levels that are already really impressive as well. But those three are just special talents, and it was fun to get to watch. More on the hitting side, I got to talk to and watch a lot of the 2024 draft picks. That was cool because I've seen those guys and I've talked to a few of them, but I hadn't really seen any of them in person at this point for the most part. I saw a few guys in Kannapolis last year, but getting to see a lot of these guys up close and personal in B game scrimmages, talk to them, hear about what they're doing. Caleb Bonnemer, second round pick of the White Sox last year, is a freak. This guy looks like he could be like 25 and he's 19. He just turned 19 this year. He's a massive dude, a lot of strength, a lot of raw power. You can see it. There is a lot to like there with Caleb Bonnemer. The second, third, fourth, fifth round picks, all kind of the experienced college guys with Nick McLean, Casey Sauke, and then Sam Antonacci. All three of those guys looked pretty impressive to me. I'm excited to see where they go. I think there's a good chance we see all of them in Winston-Salem together in high A off the bat. I think definitely Antonacci and Sauke should be in Winston. McLean didn't play at all last year, so he might be in Canny to start the year, then make his way to Winston. But we're going to see, in addition to Braden Montgomery is real fun to watch swing. That guy is, his BP swings even are just like majestic. I mean, they're powerful, they're twitchy. His swing is really quick. The bat speed is unreal. So that core of guys, like you've got, basically Montgomery was a first round college draft pick, right? Even though the White Sox didn't draft him. And then you've got your third, fourth, fifth round guys that were all advanced college draft picks as well. So there's a really fun core of those college draft guys that are all probably going to be in Winston-Salem this year. And that's something that I think is going to be fun to watch because the hitting depth is definitely lagging behind the pitching depth, as we know, as I've talked about with you many times, right? But there is a good amount of hitters now with these new draft picks, with Montgomery coming into the system, with some of the upper development guys like we've talked about. The hitting is at least there's more to watch there than there was last year and the year before, which is exciting to see going forward for sure.
Well, Elijah, you produce great White Sox content for justbaseball.com. You wrote a piece last week going over when to trade Luis Robert Jr., and I want to discuss that with you after the break on Locked On White Sox. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. And Upwork is great at helping you find the right talent with a fast and easy hiring process to help you gain cost-effective growth. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps you find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com, UPWORK.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. And March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, even who's cutting down the nets. And if you got your eye on a few underdogs this year, FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. Their spreads, money lines, and over-under, they're great. But if you want to win big or at least double your money, the parlays, the futures, and the props, that's the way to go. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop actions all tournament long. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. And joining me again today is Just Baseballs and FutureSox.net, Elijah Evans. And Elijah, where can we find all your great content? Because you're like everywhere, man.
I'm doing my best. You can find all the most of what I do on X at Elijah EV8. That's all of my different White Sox reports and everything. JustBaseball.com is all my writing. And then the Future Sox podcast is where I talk about this stuff weekly.
All right. So you wrote last Monday the 4 basically time periods to trade Luis Robert Jr. And it feels like the first period is passing as it's been all quiet on LRJ getting dealt before opening day. I think Chris Getz was on the White Sox Talk podcast basically confirming there's interest, but it doesn't sound like he's going to get moved before opening day. So what other times do you think that they'll deal him?
Yeah. So what's interesting with Robert is, he's had a good spring, right? He looks good. He looks healthy. He looks like he's taking better at bats. Like these are all positive signs and all things that are going to help build his trade value. But at the same time, teams are still weary of the injury risk and of the fact that he had a bad season last year when he was even on the field, right? So I think you've got a few options. One option is the Luis Arraez situation from last year. For those who don't know, the Padres, acquired Luis Arraez last year in May. Just basically said, hey, we're off to a slow start. We need a little bit of offensive juice. He's playing well. We feel like the price is fair, and went boom and got him early in the season. So that's the type of thing that I think is possible. Honestly, I think it's more possible than many people would think, actually, because Luis Robert, if he lights up the world in April, I'm not saying he's going to be, he doesn't have to be amazing, but if he's fully healthy and it looks like the 2023 version of Luis Robert, even to an extent, there's some teams that could jump on it. The National League is more competitive than it's been in a long time. I mean, the NL East and the NL West are just simply completely loaded with talent. There's some teams that if they struggle out of the gate, I could very realistically see them saying, hey, we have no time to waste. Our division is incredibly strong. We're going to get Luis Robert Jr. I've been talking about Philly forever. I think when we talked Luis Robert mock trades 4 or 5 months ago, and Philly was one of the teams I mentioned. If the Phillies get out to a slow start and they're 5-6 games behind Atlanta or behind the New York Mets, right? Like that division, those 3 teams are so freaking good. If they get to a slow start, Dave Dombrowski is the type of guy who could very, very well call Chris Getz and say, hey, I know it's May, but this guy looks good. We need offense. Here's 2 of our best prospects, and get that deal done. I could see a team, even like the Mets, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if the Mets jumped on something like that. The Mets are going to be aggressive. They're going to spend money. They're not afraid to spend money. Even in the NL West, right? I think a team like the D-backs could sneaky get aggressive. I think the D-backs are a team that really wants to win. They put a lot of money into their team this offseason with the Corbin Burns addition. They have a good outfield. Obviously, Corbin Carroll's incredible, but Corbin Carroll is probably a little bit better in right field or left field, whereas Luis Robert could plug in center and be their superstar, center fielder next to a Corbin Carroll, or they could switch off in center to save the health, whatever you want to do there. There's a lot of teams that could do it. The Mariners still need, if the Mariners go off to a slow start, they desperately need to make a move. I don't know if they will. I don't think they will. I don't really believe they will, but there's a lot of teams that can make this move. There's a lot of teams that are capable of it. And I think it's possible. If you don't trade him early in the season, if he gets off to a mediocre start or he gets injured a little bit, which is obviously the worst case scenario for the White Sox, because then that changes the market completely. He is the guy who, he should get moved by the deadline, right? Like he should be getting traded by the trade deadline. And that's probably the most likely outcome overall. But again, it depends on those first few months, right? Like if he's off to a rough month, you're not trading him in May if he starts the season slow because the value is going to be low at that point. And come June, if he gets hurt and the trade deadline's in July, then you're stuck with him sort of. I mean, maybe you can trade him if he has a minor injury to a team that wants to buy low. And then at that point, you're kind of admitting defeat and you're selling low on him if he's hurt at all this season, right? So the ideal situation is he has a good season, even if he doesn't start out crazy hot. If he has a quality season and can remain mostly healthy, you flip him at the deadline. You get a lot of teams that are interested. You try and drive the bid up. You see what you can get. The last case is that he sticks around all season. Yeah, not a great option. I mean, it could work. There's a chance, right? But it's not quite with like Crochet where he has contract deals, right? Robert has 2 years of $20 million options. Another year of being hurt, and that no longer looks like some great team-friendly contract, right? We've been talking for so long about like, oh, Luis Robert's on such a team-friendly contract. And like, yeah, 2023 version of Luis Robert for, at a $20 million for the next 2 years is a great team option. Luis Robert for, if he's hurt again this year for the third of the last 4 years, right? At that point, $20 million isn't much of a bargain. So, I think you ideally want to trade him at the deadline. The other option is, he starts the season really slow, but he's healthy. So then you maybe hold him to try and see if he performs well in August and September to then pick up his option, but trade him in the offseason. Possible, just messy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they're gonna. I go with window 2, what you're describing, because I just think they've been talking about still trying to trade him, trying to generate all this interest. Because again, I think they're just terrified that he's not going to stay healthy. And if he can get through April, where they basically play in the Midwest or the East Coast, but 3 games. If you can get through that, and he is, like you said, just even relatively productive, I think you got to jump at the chance and trade him at that point. And for those that are frustrated that the Sox are always trading away talent, I'm tired of it explaining. So why do the White Sox have to trade Luis Robert Jr. at some point, in your opinion?
Yeah, people are frustrated. I get being frustrated. I understand. But at the end of the day, this is a injury-prone player on a roster that has a lot of offensive holes still. And I don't think Luis Robert is staying past 2027. The first time this team is really going to even have a chance to compete is probably 2027, right? So you're banking on 1 year of a maybe healthy, often injured Luis Robert being a key piece of a lineup that has a ton of holes in it. I think you got to maximize it. You have to maximize your contention window. The contention window and the aim of this team right now is 2027 to 2030. Also, I know nobody wants to hear that the next 2 years don't matter, but they don't. I mean, they do for development, and they're important, and there's big steps to be taken. But the goal is not to win baseball games every single. I mean, yes, the goal is always win baseball games. I shouldn't say it that way. The goal is not to make a World Series run in 2025. And even if Luis Robert could help that, that's not happening. We all know that's not happening. So let's take it step by step. Let's build the talent. He's the one guy you have that can still kind of from that first of all, even just from an energy standpoint, I just think they are ready to move on from that entire core, right? Like I think that entire core is just not what's part of this future. The future of the organization is in this core of prospects and in this next generation of guys. He's not part of that group. And I ultimately just don't really think he fits with this club for many reasons. Nonetheless, just the situation of you need to get value from him. On top of that, you need to keep adding bats, right? You need to keep adding offensive talent to a system. Like I said, I feel really, really good about the pitching in this system, all things considered. There's still a lot of holes offensively. There's still a lot of talent that needs to be brought in. So I think you got to capitalize on it. You get value for him and you turn the leaf and you really allow this team to move into its next phase with an entirely new core.
So JustBaseball.com gave the White Sox another great review on how many prospects they put in their top 100. So let's discuss with Elijah after the break why there are 7 prospects in their top 100, and that's next on Locked On White Sox.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts. This show is available on all major podcast platforms. And joining me again is from Just Baseball and FutureSox.net, Elijah Evans. And Elijah, MLB Pipeline, for some reason, they just won't put Grant Taylor in the top 100. You guys, Just Baseball, you're not afraid. You put him in your top 100. Is it because of the, just what makes you guys different? What made you guys be like, you know what, we're doing it? Because he clearly has the talent. I mean, especially in spring training, I get it was a couple of outings, but my gosh, he was hitting 100 and nobody could touch him.
Yeah, so all credit to Aram Layton here. This is Aram's baby. Aram's the head of Just Baseball. I can't take credit for this one. I'm in his ear, of course, talking about some things with him throughout the process, but this is all him. This is his list. He takes a lot of pride in this. He works hundreds of hours on, watching film of every single player on this list. And, from everything I've talked to Aram about, it's just like I think in general, I find Pipeline to be a little bit slower in adapting to break out guys that have shown themselves. And I think Aram is incredible at identifying talent and making sure the guys that are, talented, and just talking to him, like, there's just too much talent to leave him off. I mean, that's what Aram told me. I told him, I texted him when he was working on the list, and I was like, Grant Taylor's got to be on there, right? And he was like, yeah, we're going to see, but probably. And, there's just too much talent. He came in at 83rd. So not even like, very back of the list, right? Like debuting on the list at 83rd. There's just way too much to like there, and too much stuff to not have him in a top 100 list at this point. The fastball is 60, he has a 60 current, 70 future grade, 101. Obviously it has a lot of movement to it. The slider is elite. It's a 60 grade slider. The curveball is 50, 55, but a curveball flashes +2. And then the cutter is listed on our write-up as his fourth best pitch. But I thought the cutter in spring training was actually just as impressive as the slider and the curveball at times. So I think he's taken even another step forward with the cutter. And Grant Taylor's now throwing a changeup. He talked to me in spring training. He was like, yeah, I'm messing around with all these changeups these guys are throwing. So this is a new thing he's playing with. So for a guy who has all of his stuff going glove side, right now, he's got an arm side option in his changeup that is a changeup that's fading away, and he's not going to throw it a ton. But adding a changeup into a mix of 4 elite pitches already is ridiculous. And it's not like it's stuff without command. That's what's very exciting about Grant Taylor. The injury and the health and the buildup is the issue here. That's the hesitancy. But the stuff is getting commanded too. It's not a guy who's just throwing stuff and doesn't know where it's going. He's throwing stuff and it's accurate and it's located well for the most part, right? That you don't see that from a lot of guys with 20 big league minor league innings under their belt at this point. And someone who, like I've said it so many times, like he was supposed to be the 1 to Paul Skeens 2 before he went down with Tommy John in college, his last year of college at LSU. Like that's not a guy that's just like a decent pitcher, right? Like you're not going to be listed ahead of Paul Skeens, even Paul Skeens before he reached his peak, right? Like he's a ridiculous talent, Grant Taylor, and he's someone who is going to keep rising if he's healthy. It's just about being very careful. He's going to be on the Noah Schultz plan, I think, right? From everything I heard in spring training, he's going to be on the Schultz plan, the way they handled Schultz kind of 2023 into 2024, right? Like cautious, take your time, don't rush this guy. The last thing in the world I personally want to see is them to immediately turn Taylor into a reliever. I heard some buzz of like, oh, he could just be up this year as a closer, immediately be the closer of the future. No, I'm not here for that. There's too much to like and too much command and quality of stuff for him to divert from being a starter at this point, right? Later on, sure, we'll see what happens. For now, you take it easy. You give him 3-4 innings to start. You let him build up his arm, and come next year, he's fully built up and healthy to become, a top end pitching prospect in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I like that they're developing him to his ceiling, which could be a top of the line rotation pitcher where you're right. His floor you've already seen his floor. I mean, they could probably bring him up now if you saw what he did in spring training. And I know Scott Merkin, I had Courtney Finicum on the show last week, and she was talking to Scott Merkin down there, and he was saying, just bring him up now because he's throwing 100. But I agree. Why not develop these guys to their ceilings? Because we've already seen a guy that, and this is why I want to ask this question, it just popped in my head. We've already seen a guy who they've tried to develop to a ceiling with the same type of stuff in terms of the heat and the velocity in Michael Kopech. And then they had to go to his floor, which was being a closer. Is Taylor, though, a little bit hopefully mentally different? And I'm not saying mentally because everybody has their, issues. We know Kopech had his issues with anxiety. I'm talking about like just being able to grasp and understand and be able to pitch to your pitching plan. Is Taylor capable of that? Because you've actually talked to the guy, know that, kind of met the guy. Is he completely different than Michael Kopech, at least in that direction, where you don't have to trade him to the Dodgers or have Scott Boras be his agent to be like, oh, I should listen to you guys?
Yeah, very different energy. Just from in person. Again, I'm not going to say better or worse in any way. I don't want to qualify like that. But a different energy guy for sure. Very mellow mannered for the most part. Super, thinking about his pitches. Right. That's something that the whole issue last year with Kopech at times was like, oh, he only wants to throw fastballs. Where is the rest of the off speed? Like Taylor's just developing a fifth pitch right now, in addition to his 4 elite pitches. Right. Like that's something that I don't think we ever really saw from Kopech, frankly. I think Taylor is thinking about his arsenal. He's working through it. He's talking with Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith. I mean, when they were in big league camp together, their lockers were all next to each other. They're working through that stuff. He just seems very cerebral. He seems like he's here to learn from guys. He wanted to learn. He wanted to pick up everything he could while he was in spring training. I'm pretty confident in his, that side of things for him. It's just going to come down to, again, it's got to be a patient development process, because you can't rush a guy like this. You can't try to force him to throw a ton of innings, because, he hasn't thrown a lot of innings in the past 2 years now. So we'll see what happens. But I'm pretty excited and confident about Taylor's, just upside as a pitcher, as a person in general.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB fantasy draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss which players need to produce trade value seasons. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion with Elijah Evans of Just Baseball and Future Sox. And again, Elijah, where can we find all your content?
Thank you, Todd. You can find me at Elijah EV8 on X, justbaseball.com for all the written stuff, and then talking every single prospect in the system, the Future Sox podcast.
And you can leave comments on the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJW or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.